Welcome back, everyone. This will be the last episode where you'll see the last year's Auto 3s in the opening sequence. Some of those guys have graduated and moved on to post-secondary school. Others have chosen not to come back, but a lot of them will be back along with some new Auto 3 students. So hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks I'm going to have a new segment with some of those kids on board with that. School begins next Tuesday for us, and although it's going to be virtual, hopefully in the coming months we're going to have the students back in the building and doing some work, especially on this old 48 that we haven't had a chance to work on for a while. It's currently covered with a lot of dust just from sitting. I'm looking forward to eventually getting the kids back in the building so they can start doing some of the work, getting their hands dirty and cut up, and not just me. This week's episode also marks the end of the 2 series. We will begin next week with 3-1, which is the beginning of our 3rd season of doing this, which is also evident by the fact that I'm back in my uniforms and I've got a brand new Snap-on hat. Thanks, Pete, for that. I appreciate it. Again, sit back, hope you enjoy this brief episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks, eventually with some students back in front of the camera. Got the dye powder on the front Harley fender, so we're going to get this thing blocked out, find out where our low spots are, get it fixed and ready to paint. That's a dent that I was talking about earlier. Okay, you guys have seen me do this a few times. We're using the block so that we can keep it flat, find our low spots, and get everything fixed from there. There's enough primer on this thing, though. I think I can block it clean from there, but we'll know once we get to work on this and get it finished off. After getting the fender blocked down with 220, we found a couple of spots that needed to be taken care of, but that is the whole point of block sanding. So once these 2 places are taken care of, we'll put another coat of primer on it, let that sit up, and we'll be ready to wet sand and paint it. The fender's back in primer. Got a little rain on it before I brought it in, but it'll be fine. So we'll get this wet sanded next time and start putting some paint on it. I've got the dye powder on our Harley fender, ready to wet sand it, hopefully get some paint on it today. You've seen me do this several times. Want to make sure that you're still understanding what's going on here. When we're sanding this fender, we want to go in like 30 to 45 degree angles. You never want to sand parallel to the fender itself or even across. That'll put lines in it and grooves in it that could actually show up in that paint, especially as dark as that blue is that we're using. So you want to go across, again, 30 to 45 degrees or so. You can change it back up to this side as well. And when you notice here, when we take the squeegee and pull it across it, you should be able to see, again, the dark spots where that dye powder is, and we'll keep going until it's perfectly smooth. And then that 400 grit will be perfect to paint over. Understand when you're doing this that you can't just sand the spots. Okay, like there's some low spots here and here. You can't just sand those spots there. You actually have to sand it all the way around and back. Otherwise, it'll put a little like ripple there. So you want to make sure that you're sanding across it and in a larger area to get rid of the whole low spot and make the whole thing smooth. Okay, so we'll keep doing that. Sneaking up on it. Coming all the way back to here. And now it's gone. Now you can see there's a little touch there, I'll hit that next, but there's a little bit of the red or that orange showing through. That's going to be fine. That's not big enough an area that we're going to have to worry about with that blue. It'll cover fine. If it was a larger area, then I'd put a little primer on it. But as long as I don't go beyond that one to get the rest of this out, we should be okay. The fender's wet sanded, cleaned off, and ready for the blue. I'm masking off the fender for the white. As we did before with the rear fender, you just want to keep a lot of tape handy, have it out, so you can lay it down nice and straight. That's a little off. Just have to keep doing it. I can measure it and mark it, but I don't think I can get it this way. I don't want to do the typical ring around the front like a lot of guys do. Too many people do it. I don't want to take it all the way off the end either. So what I'm going to do is just kind of bring it to a point inside the fender, like that. I'm going to cut that. Go to the back and bring the other side up, and then we'll fix our point. I can see there's a little hump right there that's off a little bit. I didn't notice earlier, but again, keeping these separate, I'll be able to fix that. So we'll bring this one around. Get it about where we want it. give myself some extra here, get rid of the roll. Now I can start playing with the front to get it even. All I'm going to do is sit in front of it, start lifting each one of these and working them in until they're even here and the point is in the center. It's off by about a 32nd of an inch, but if anybody can tell that, they're too close to the bike. All masked off and ready for the white. There it is with the white on it and unmasked. You're going to have to wait till next week to see what it looks like with the clear on it. I've got the axle shaft chucked up into the lathe. We're beginning the machining process, as you can see, to get this thing machined down to 1 inch. The original pin is a 1 inch diameter pin. This was a 1 1/4. We're going to get this machine down to 1 inch so it fits into our machine. Then we can finish it off and get that steering put back together. Here's our grader steering pin in progress. It's a little slow going. That shaft is so hard, but we'll take our time and we'll get it. I'm here with another acquisition from Steve LeBeau out of Maryland. This is a 1971 BSA Thunderbolt. It's got not quite original, but I've got some pretty good plans for this thing once I get around to this one. What I do want to warn you about is if you ever have the opportunity to run across Steve LeBeau out of Maryland, run the other way unless you're looking to buy something, because it's almost a guarantee that if you go to his place, you're coming back with something. Now that the gear and chain assembly is back in the rear tine tiller, I want to get busy on replacing this detent shaft. Originally I took it apart and cleaned it and it was okay, but since we're in here, we pulled it this far apart with the new chain assembly and all, I think it's a good idea that we replace this now. First thing we're going to do is get rid of this E-clip. And we'll get the detent pulled out, and there's a spring and a check ball in there. Hopefully we don't let the spring disappear on us. Okay. It's still in place. We should be able to push this one right through it. Without actually having it in the machine, it's a little hard to activate it without hitting it, but it does seem to be working fine. Now that everything's back together and seems to be working properly, we're just going to coat everything with a lot of grease before we put the housing back together. This is pretty much what you need to do to grease it. And when we put the gasket on it and the housing back together, it'll keep dirt and water out, and the grease will keep everything lubricated. Now I'm going to put a little bit of grease around the perimeter to help hold the gasket down while we put the housing together. Now we can put the gasket in place. We have all the bolt holes lined up. Grease is holding the gasket steady for us, so now we can put the housing together. We're just about down all the way. We just need to help it along and get it over top of this one shaft right here. So I'll take a screwdriver, try to push this over, and put it in place. There it is. Okay, get all the perimeter bolts put in and tightened down. Then we'll be ready to start assembling this thing. We'll get them all seated first, and then we'll come back around and tighten them. There we go. The one tine's back on now, so just have to get some hardware for the shield, put that on, and then we can start putting the rest of it back together. Sound good? Yeah. Sounds better. Yeah, it's a little high. That's good. pulling out the plug to gain access to the float bowl, and we want the fuel level to be right at the bottom of the hole in the bowl. Now he's using the screw and that jam nut to adjust the float level. He's loosening the jam nut so he can turn the screw one way or the other to raise or lower the float, and then he can come back to the window on the side and see where the fuel level is from there. They win.
That's good.
Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have more of the rear tine tiller back together. We'll get the pin finish for the steering on our old grader, and we'll have the clear on that front fender and see what it looks like back on the bike. See you next week.